This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning. I'm Whit Johnson in New York. We're coming on the air with major breaking news from the U.S. Supreme Court on the final day of its term. The High Court has just issued one of its most consequential rulings in recent decades, a decision that not only affects the 2024 race for president following last week's contentious debate, but also the future of the presidency itself from this day forward. Moments ago, the justices ruling on Donald Trump's claim of absolute immunity from criminal prosecution, his core argument in both the 2020 election interference case in Washington, D.C., and the classified documents case in Florida. The court deciding this morning presidents do have immunity for official acts, but there is no immunity for non-official acts. The court then sending it back to the lower courts. So let's get right out to ABC's senior national correspondent, Terry Moran, at the Supreme Court. And Terry, as we noted, this goes far beyond former President Donald Trump, but presidents in the future.
Absolutely. This is a ruling, the biggest ruling on presidential power in decades. All future presidents will have to reckon with it. And it is a 43-page opinion that basically says there's more work to be done in this prosecution at the lower level. But the court did, as you suggest, have to outline the big question. Donald Trump's claim that former presidents are absolutely immune from prosecution, can never be prosecuted for any of their official acts. And in this case, the court says that a former president may have some immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts during his tenure in office. And then comes the fine print. And what the court does here is steps through each of the actions of former President Trump in his alleged conspiracy to overthrow the 2020 election. His conversations with Mike Pence, pressuring Mike Pence. His conversations with Justice Department officials, pressuring them. His conversations with state officials and his speech on January 6th. And in each instance, the court takes a look, raises the issues, and sends it back down to the trial court to figure out, under this guidance, is Trump immune on each of those areas of evidence in this prosecution? What it means is a lot more work at the trial court and a lot more delay for this trial. We'll take a deeper look at it, but that's the basic outline. Trump does not have absolute immunity. He can be prosecuted, but it depends on how the lower court looks at this opinion in each of those very fact-specific areas.
Terry, thank you. And stand by here. Let's bring in our senior Washington reporter, Devin Dwyer, who's also been following this. And Devin, it's worth going back to some of these oral arguments in April because we to a degree, saw some of this coming with the justices already suggesting presidents need some immunity. So how does this now play out going forward?
Well, this is in no short sense, Whit, a big win for Donald Trump. It means delay. We already knew that a trial on these charges would be unlikely before the presidential election. Now it's all but impossible based on today's decision. And I want to just quote for you it's from the dissent here. This is a Supreme Court that is sharply divided on this issue along ideological lines. This was a 6-3 decision. The conservatives issuing that decision that Terry just outlined. The liberals in this case dissenting very, very sharply in stark language. In fact, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said today that the court gives Donald Trump all the immunity that he asked for and more. She accuses the court of an atextual, ahistorical, and unjustifiable immunity test that, in her view, puts the president above the law. So as much as many court observers had hoped that this court would somehow try to find a decision that would unify on their bench and the country, they did not do that here, and this is a sharply divided opinion.
All right, Devin, thank you. Let's come back here in the studio with our chief Washington correspondent, John Carl, who's with me here at the desk. And we were talking about this earlier because this is not just about the January 6th case. There's a documents case and other charges. And there's been a lot of frustration from Democrats and those who would like to see the former president held accountable. More delays ahead now.
Look, this is an absolute win for Donald Trump, not just the substance of the opinion, but also the court had the option here to make the decision effective immediately or go through a traditional waiting period of 25 days. There's no expedited period. This effectively grants Donald Trump blanket immunity because it makes it seems to me now, impossible for a trial to go forward, either in the classified documents case, because this is also at stake there, and the January 6th case. And I think when you look at the dissenting opinion, Devin read part of it. This line stands out to me. Says the decision, quote, makes a mockery of the principle foundational to our Constitution and system of government that no man is above the law. Now, look, this decision doesn't say that what Trump did in his effort to overturn the election is covered by this immunity, but it would take time. It's going to take time that simply isn't there. And you have an election coming up, and you have Donald Trump has made it abundantly clear that if he wins this election, this case goes away.
And the timing is so key here. And I do want to put that graphic back up on the screen. We were listing out the various charges because now the special counsel would have to take another look at all of this. That's the graphic there, the Trump criminal trials and the charges there. Let's bring in Rachel Scott, our senior congressional correspondent. Also, you've been out on the campaign trail. Rachel, you were there on January 6th. You've also been following closely what the Trump campaign is saying. And even this morning, he's been following this, and he's been posting things on social media and even deflecting and saying, it's not that big of a deal for me. Maybe it's something Joe Biden should worry about when it comes to presidential immunity.
And I'm told from a senior advisor to the Trump campaign that we are expecting a statement from the former president at any moment now. Actually, we just got it. The former president says that this is a big win for our Constitution and democracy. Proud to be an American. That is the first reaction coming in from Donald Trump to this ruling today. Out on the campaign trail, he has made retribution a core part of his message. We saw it on the debate stage just days ago. He said that this would have big implications, not only for him, but also for future presidents, including President Biden, saying that in the future, President Biden could also have to be faced with something very similar to this. There is no question about it. As John Carl just noted, this is big for Donald Trump because time is something that his campaign, that the former president, were deeply worried about. They did not want to see this trial happen any closer to Election Day, Whit.
And can I just make one very quick point? So while it is an absolute total victory for Donald Trump in the legal sense, the court does not affirm what Trump has been saying on the campaign trail. Trump has been saying that presidents have absolute immunity for anything, that you cannot charge a president or a former president for anything that happened while he or she was president. But the court does say, in the opinion, there is no immunity for unofficial acts. The president is not above the law. The issue here is that it's going to take time to adjudicate what is or is not an official act in the case against him.
Yeah, and sort all of that out. Absolutely will take time. Let's go to the White House. Our senior White House correspondent, Selena Wang, is there. And Selena, you're already getting response from the Biden administration. We know in the past, President Biden has said he can't see any reason why a president would have absolute immunity. What are they saying now?
Yeah, Whit, that's right. And for the Biden campaign, this case underscores the core theme of President Biden's reelection, the stakes of this, their message that Trump is a threat to democracy, someone who is obsessed with power. And in a statement that they just sent over, they said, look, today's ruling does not change the facts. So let's be very clear about what happened on January 6th. Donald Trump snapped after he lost the 2020 election and encouraged a mob to overthrow the results of a free and fair election. Trump is already running for president as a convicted felon. Now, the campaign, Whit, has also been warning that if Trump gets a second term, there will only be darker days ahead, that he will continue to try and shield himself from prosecution. Whit, this campaign has been saying now for quite some time that Trump wants the power of a king or a monarch, to have absolute power without accountability. So the Supreme Court decision today does not change their messaging on those points.
All right, Selena Wang for us. Thank you so much. I want to bring in Kate Shaw, our Supreme Court contributor. And Kate, I think it's worth, again, going back to some of these oral arguments in April, because the justices laid out just how important and consequential this is. Justice Neil Gorsuch said, we're writing a rule for the ages. Justice Kavanaugh said the court's decision would have implications for the future of the presidency and the future of the country. So now that we're looking at all of this now, have we answered some of those questions about what would be an official act that a president could have immunity from and what wouldn't?
Well, Whit, I think it's definitely right that this is an opinion the court has written for the ages. It's probably the most important Supreme Court opinion about the power of the presidency and protections enjoyed by the president since Nixon versus United States, almost exactly 50 years ago. So that was a July 1974 opinion. And the court in that case rejected Richard Nixon's arguments that he didn't have to cooperate and produce Oval Office tapes. Many of his arguments echoed in lots of ways arguments made by former President Trump here. So that case was a unanimous loss for the former president president. This case is not unanimous, but a very big win for former President Trump, recognizing for the first time this sort of immunity of ex-presidents from criminal prosecution, not for everything they do, as John Carl was saying. So unofficial acts are still subject to prosecution, but recognizing this kind of immunity, some absolute immunity for core presidential functions, some qualified immunity for other official acts, that seems to be what the opinion says, is an enormous addition of new powers and protections to the president in a way we just haven't seen before. So I think the dissent is quite right to say this is a seismic opinion, and in many ways it is hard to square with previous constitutional decisions.
And Kate, just to follow up on that and to see how this plays out in the lower court now, you talked about the hypotheticals. I mean, the justices were bringing up everything from what if a president stages a coup? What if a president assassinates a rival? So how do those questions get answered moving forward?
You know, I think that all of that, right? So the lower courts initially will take a look at what's in Jack Smith's allegation, right? Some of what is alleged having to do with the vice president or the Department of Justice, pretty likely or definitely official conduct. Other things, right, trying to generate fake slates of electors, that is probably on the unofficial side of the ledger. So as to the conduct at issue here, the courts will be examining closely how this new test applies. But those hypotheticals, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that some of those very, very extreme hypotheticals would fall on the official side of the line. If you're the president and you're ordering even unlawful action by subordinates, that's acting in your official capacity. Only the president can do that. And so I think it's pretty clear that this case has blessed the idea that some of that conduct, really extreme conduct, would be subject to immunity forever if engaged in by a president. And I think that's why the stakes of this case are so high.
All right, thank you. Let's bring in ABC News investigative reporter Catherine Faulders. Catherine, I know you've been talking to Trump's legal team and all of this. They were focused on this case, not just, again, about the January 6th case, but also the documents case. What's their reaction today?
Right. I was just on the phone with a source close to Trump's legal team, and the quote that they gave me, and they're still reading through this just like us, but they say this is as good as it could possibly be without absolute immunity. Obviously, that's for the reasons that we've been discussing. This is a very detailed opinion. They're focused on some of the language in this opinion that single out Trump's words, for example, obviously Mike Pence, as we've also been talking about. But this is something that maybe they predicted, but didn't predict that it would go this much in their favor. Now, of course, they didn't find absolute immunity, but this essentially stalls this. There likely won't be a trial before the election. There will be a lot of litigation at the D.C. District Court down the street. But they also are focused on the fact that this could affect Florida. Remember, the judge there has essentially stalled the proceedings in Florida. That's the classified documents case. The Trump lawyers filed a motion there based on presidential immunity. They want the case thrown out. They say that Trump was immune in the classified boxes case because when he landed in Florida, he was still president, and therefore that's an official act. Now, the judge there will likely schedule hearings as well in this. The judge, Judge Cannon, who oversees that, appointed by Trump, has indicated that she wants to wait to rule on that immunity motion until the Supreme Court weighed in. Well, they have. We could likely see hearings down in Florida on this as well.
All right, Catherine, thank you. Let's go back to Terry Moran at the Supreme Court. You're getting more information on sort of the practical implications here.
Precisely how this decision works. There's a big principle that we've already articulated that Chief Justice Roberts expresses this way. The president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law, but he goes on to say, Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch, and the president therefore may not be prosecuted for exercising core constitutional powers and is entitled to presumptive immunity. That means the trial court, each time the special counsel says, well, we want to prosecute him for this act or that act, we'll have to presume the starting point of the analysis is that the president is immune. And the court actually did some work in that regard on one instance. In December of 2020, President Trump, in the late at night, called in the Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and other officials and pressured him to get on board with the Trump campaign and challenge results in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Michigan. And Rosen refused, and Trump threatened to fire him. The court says that is core constitutional protected presidential activity. And it says what Chief Justice Roberts says is that because as president, Donald Trump can fire anybody he wants in the executive branch, that cannot be criminalized, even if it was done as the allegation is in the prosecution's case, to further a conspiracy to overthrow the results. Because it's firing an executive branch official or demanding action by an executive branch official, it cannot be criminalized. So he totally wins on that count at the Supreme Court, and the lower court is going to have to deal with a very high bar that the court establishes here to prosecute a president.
And Terry laying out some of those specific examples.